Alright, g'day guys, welcome back to the True Footy YouTube channel for this week's edition of my AFL tips. Now, in case you missed it on the weekend, I did of course release a podcast with my boy Druzy, True Footy Podcast 56, where he and I and Bush get together to talk about all things YouTube and AFL and Fremantle generally. So if you haven't already, I recommend going checking that out and also checking out his channel as well. Also, just want to say a big thank you to everyone who got around the live stream on Saturday. That was a huge effort. We did 5 hours, didn't know if it was going to be worth it, but at one point we had 104 viewing at once, and some people really chipped in with the donations as well, which I really appreciate. So I just want to say thank you again. We don't do it for the donations, we don't ask for donations, but I really appreciate the support that you guys have given me to try and make this sort of more of a career and push towards growing the channel. So yeah, I just want to say thank you again. In terms of the channel though, guys, I do want to just say I'm probably going to have a little bit of a period now where I kind of step back a little bit. I know this sounds really familiar, but I've got a little bit going on in my personal life. Life has kind of kicked me down, stomped on my nuts and spat on my neck. And then some things I didn't like happened. No, but seriously, I've just got a lot going on at the moment. I'm all right. But it might just be a case of just the weekly tips video. I have some AFL Evo content that I made months ago that's still going to come out. But yeah, you might see a tiny bit less of me. But I do have a collaboration I'm working on right now with a guy called JKT Vlogs. I'm editing it. I'm taking so long to edit it because of all the shit going on. In the meantime, you should go check out his channel. I'll leave a link in the description. He does vlogs. He's a big Eagles fan, but he's all around a good bloke. So go check out his channel. Now, before we get into the tips, I will do my usual thing where I shout out who's leading fantasy and who's leading the tipping award. Now, the winner is still, or the leader rather, is still for Thug Fife, Taz Wood. He's been leading just about every week. His averages are still a healthy 1638, although I did pip him for points this round. I moved up to 58th, so I'm coming for you, Taz. I have also moved up in the tipping 8 spots to 58th after getting 5 last round, but the winner is my boy Sean Pro, long-time friend of the channel. He's Pip Cardman, who slipped down to 4th. He only had 4 over that round, so Sean Pro is the leader with 37 and a margin of 129 points. And the winner this round, only one person got 8 with a margin of 13, and that was Jasper. So well done, fellas. Doing really good. Just to go through my tips, ones I got wrong were Brisbane on the Thursday night, and I thought that was going so well before Brisbane really took the rug from underneath me. Got Collingwood right, St Kilda again shat the bed, and I got my tip wrong there. And then the other two were GWS. Lost to Port Adelaide, and boy did I hear about it from all my Port supporting subscribers. And finally, I did tip Carlton to beat the Bulldogs as well and got that wrong. So pigs, absolute pigs. So as I usually do, guys, let's go through the ladder very quickly on Squiggle before I get into the round. Port Adelaide still on top with a very impressive victory, which I'll talk a little bit more about. Geelong, Brisbane and Essendon make up the top 4, and Richmond slid up into 6th spot. That is quite impressive. Well, actually, it's not that impressive because we know they're reigning premiers, but I didn't realize they jumped quite that far. To be 3-2-1 with a percentage of 100.3. It's a pretty good position considering I think they're a long way off their best. The Saints slipped down to 7th, although are still in a good spot, and Carlton slide into the 8th. I'm happy for Terry, Dan, and all the other Carlton supporting fans. It must be good. It must be a good sight seeing your team in 8th spot. Gold Coast slipped out of the 8 with a reality check last week against the D's. GWS are 10th and kind of struggling, to be honest. They're only 9% ahead of West Coast now, who are in 11th. Bulldogs, Hawthorn, Fremantle are the next 3. It's crazy to think there's only 1 spot between Hawthorn and Fremantle. I feel like there's a big gap there in ability. No disrespect to Fremantle. And the bottom 4 are Melbourne, North, Sydney and Adelaide. Adelaide now with 0 and 6, 2 wins behind the next worst team. It's looking more and more likely that they are going to win the Wooden Spoon, although there probably was an improved performance on the weekend against the Eagles. But let's get into it, guys. We kick off the Perth hub with Geelong and Collingwood at Optus Stadium on a Thursday night, and this is a real toughie. I've had a look at their head-to-head. I think they split the last 5 games 3-2. I think Geelong's way. Last time they met, Collingwood won in the finals by 10 points. Both of these sides, I think, are comfortable with a trip to Optus, although I think Geelong have lost to Fremantle and West Coast, whereas Collingwood have at least beaten West Coast. I don't think I'm going to read too much to that. Who do I think is the better side? I would have said Collingwood, but I think Geelong's form at the moment is looking very strong. I'm going to back Geelong in here, I reckon. I do still think Collingwood are probably my prediction for the grand final. But Geelong are a side you can never underrate, or like people write them off, and I've probably been guilty of it at times. Look, I'll say Geelong win this by 14 points. Essendon and the Bulldogs at Metricon Stadium is an interesting one. You got Essendon up in 4th spot, and the Bulldogs really coming off a really terrible performance against the Blues. No disrespect to the Blues, but I think everyone would admit the Bulldogs are a much better side than what we saw on Sunday night, even though Carlton played really well. The last time they played, the Bulldogs was that game where the Bulldogs were leading by like 21 goals at one point, when Essendon literally just mentally had finished the season early. But I don't think I'd read too much into that. I'd have to say, with Essendon's form line, they're currently a top 4 side, I'd feel much more comfortable tipping them based on current form. Are they going by 4 goals? Yeah, let's call it 4 goals. All right, now we got a semi-final rematch from last year's game at the Gabba, where the GWS Giants knocked the Lions out in straight sets. That was a bit of an upset at the time, but looking at the fortunes lately, this is a hard one to peg. Again, Brisbane, 4 games won, and they've all been at home, and 2 losses have both been away. I'm pretty sure they beat the Giants in Sydney last year. The Giants are coming off, Port Adelaide are a good side, no doubt, but probably not their best performance, and their form has been really patchy. And I guess you could say the thing about the Lions, they really ran out of steam in their Thursday night game against the Cats. So I was quite disappointed with that. They looked every bit this better side at halftime. And Geelong they just stopped running Brisbane. They were literally just running up and down on the spot. This would make it 2 away games in a row, although no actual travel. Oh, this is a tough one, actually. Look, the Giants have been up and down this season so far. They're coming off not their best performance. This is exactly why I expect them to probably pull out a good performance. I'll say the Giants win this. But it's a pretty even matchup, this one, I would say. Sydney versus the Gold Coast at the SCG. Gold Coast has won there a couple of years ago. I think it was 2018. They got a big upset win there. Gee, the Swans, if they weren't a bottom 4 side before, they will be after losing Heaney for the rest of the year. And is it Josh Kennedy's out for 6 weeks or something stupid? So 2 really big, experienced, heavy lifters in that forward line and midfield. I know Melbourne are a little bit of an unknown quantity at the moment, but I think that probably was a disappointing result. I wonder if they just run out of a little bit of steam at the moment. Oh, this is a really tough one. It's Sydney's home game, but with those injuries, this is exactly the sort of game Sydney will win, and I'll feel like a dickhead. No, I'm going to say Gold Coast do win this one. It'd be huge if they did, and it would be a big blow for Adelaide if Sydney won it. I'll say Gold Coast win this by 8 points. Richmond versus North Melbourne at Metricon Stadium. Richmond's having a little bit of a return to form. They had that horrifically low-scoring game against the Swans, 36-24 or something, was it? Or 34-26, I think. I've never seen a result quite like that. I know it's shortened quarters, but that is crazy. You had the 2 coaches bitching at each other about, game styles and all that. The Tigers are heavily undermanned at the moment, going a second year in a row with a lot of injuries. Obviously, Hooley's not playing, Cochin's not playing, and Shane Edwards is out as well. Some important big hitters for them missing. North Melbourne, by contrast, again, a disappointing side at times. Getting pumped by the Dogs is probably the standout disappointing performance. They've won in Sydney this year. They had a decent run against the Bombers last week. But look, the Bombers are, pretty high on the ladder as well. Look, I'm going to stop piss-farting around. I think Richmond's a better side, but I think North beat them last year, and this is a tough one. Now, I'll say Richmond have a little bit more confidence now. They've got a bit more momentum. I'll say they'll beat the Roos. Carlton versus Port Adelaide, another tough game. I'm aware that I don't tip Port Adelaide that often, it seems, because people are convinced I hate them. But, look, Carlton are coming off a really, really impressive win. It's hard to say any win for them so far has been better than the GMHBA win against Geelong, because that's just a huge scout. One of the toughest fixtures possible in football for any side, I reckon. But the way they dispatched the Bulldogs that was a huge step for them. Haven't they only breached 100 twice or something in the last couple of years? They're both against the Bulldogs, and this one was in shorter quarters. They were pretty clinical. They really got their ends up in that last term. Coming against Port Adelaide, who answered a big question. They've had one real test up until this point against Brisbane, and it's harsh to say they failed it, but obviously they were kind of put in their place by a side that we know is top 2/top 4. But then to beat GWS on a neutral ground, Yeah, I think that was a big step for them. And to be 5 out of 6, you'd think surely they're on track for finals, considering how many games do you reckon you need to win to play finals this year? 10 or 11? They've got 5 already. Look, long story short, neutral ground, Gabba. I think it's going to be during the day, so it won't be too greasy, which I think would be Port's favour. Look, I'm going to tip Port, but this is the sort of game that, Carlton would prove me wrong in. Hawthorn versus Melbourne. Two sides that are quite close to each other in the ladder, which is crazy. Again, I think Hawthorn is playing so much better than the 13th, but they've come up against some of the best teams in the competition from last year's top 6. I think Brisbane, Geelong, Richmond, GWS, to name a few, and I think Collingwood was in that as well. So 5 out of 6, and to be 3-3 is good. I feel like I probably said that last week as well, but the only thing is 84% doesn't look great. So that's the reason they're so low. And Melbourne, finally got a bit of a monkey off their back. They had an unconvincing win against Carlton, where they won by a point. Mind you, Carlton's been very good since then. And beating Gold Coast last week, I guess, is positive because my team didn't do that. But nonetheless, I think Hawthorn are a better side here. Though I'm conscious one of Melbourne's only wins last year was against the Hawks. Hawthorn don't seem to play too well at Giant Stadium, which this is at. Nonetheless, I'm going to back them in. And I'll probably get backyard Charizard on my nuts again. And not in a good way. I'll say 25 points. We've gone pretty generous on the margins. Oh, here we go. Fremantle coming off probably their best win in a number of years. What were they, 6.5 goals down or something like that? At least 6 goals down. We were thinking the game was over at quarter time on the live stream. And then St Kilda just stopped, and Fremantle really, it wasn't just that St Kilda stopped, Fremantle really worked their way into the game. You could tell they just started dominating, their confidence was up, and which is a real credit to them. I think Sean Darcy was one of the best on ground before he went down with concussion. They have massive injuries to their back line. I think, was it Brendan Cox was laid out, and they've already got Hamling, Pearce, and Griffin Logue out as well. So, and then what did Lobb injure his ankle as well. So a lot of adversity at Fremantle to overcome that will give them a lot of, confidence going into this derby. So it's kind of a bad time for the Eagles. But to contrast that, the Eagles are also going pretty well. Coming off, 2 games against bottom 4 sides against Sydney and Adelaide. But at least they're looking closer to the form we saw last year and the year before. Still not perfect. I thought Adelaide brought a pretty good energy to the game. But the Eagles just outclassed them and outworked them over the 4 quarters. Look, I just think the Eagles are a better side, especially if, Sean Darcy and Roy Lobb aren't playing this week. The dominance of Nick Nat Nui, even Fife's going to struggle to overcome that. If the Eagles mid's getting first choice all day, and then, potentially 4 tall targets that the Dockers have to think about with all their backline injuries, I think the Eagles will win this by 27 points. Adelaide versus St Kilda. God, in the live stream, I remember Cardman and Log Dog and all the big Saints fans were worried about this game because of how frustrating that loss would have been for St Kilda. And that's 2 bad losses this year. North Melbourne and now Fremantle, where there was 6 goals up in both games, if I'm not mistaken, and lost narrowly, which is, a real blow for finals hopes. St Kilda, I think, I'm happy to say from what I've seen, they look like they've come along this year. They definitely look like they've taken a step. Maybe next year is the year they start phasing out those close losses where they just fade out. Sometimes teams have years where they have a lot of close losses. Maybe it's the year before a good year. Who knows? But Adelaide will again probably need to rise to the occasion here. They'll probably sense a bit of blood in the water with St Kilda coming off such a confidence-sapping loss. And Adelaide have been improved in the last fortnight, I would say. They're going to rate themselves, especially at home. But I'm going to back in the Saints to record a 4-point victory. It'll be a good contest, I think. Anyway, guys, we have reached the end of the round, so we can take a look at the ladder as to what it looks like now that I've finished my tips. Port Adelaide still on top, 6-1, because I tipped them to win this week as well. Geelong taking out 2nd spot, and Essendon quietly firming in that top 4 in 3rd spot. Just been quietly going about their business this year, not wreaking too much havoc, but sit 5-1, and have obviously played 1 less game as well. So they're a team to watch in the coming weeks for sure. Richmond slide back into that top 4. Another side that's kind of anonymously improved their position. Brisbane, St Kilda, GWS, and Gold Coast back in the 8. And my boys West Coast still not in the 8, despite winning 3 on the trot in my predictions. And Hawthorn up to 10th. Collingwood down to 11th. Again, that seems so bizarre, especially when you look at that percentage. They have the second best percentage at 128%. But I've got them 11th at the end of the round, and probably still a premiership contender, I think. Carlton 12th, Bulldogs 13th. Again, yeah, the Carlton seems so much in better form than the Dogs, yet not much, divides them. Fremantle, Sydney, North Melbourne, Melbourne, and Adelaide, who are 0 and 7, make up my bottom 5. And I do wonder if that bottom 5, the one that I'm looking at right now on my screen, that might not change for the rest of the year. Who knows? Tell me what you think in the comments. Anyway, guys, that comes to the end of a predictions video. I'm not sure if I'll get to do one again before my next predictions video. We'll have to see. I'm going to be quietly editing another video in the background. No idea if I'm going to get to do a live stream soon, but you will hear about that on social media. It's the minute I decide to do one. So we'll see what happens. But I appreciate your support, appreciate you watching, and I'll see you guys all in the next video. Cheers.